The ultimate tanking guide for Nerubar Palace, covering LFR, normal, and heroic. Very quickly going to describe how this guide is set up. The video covers every boss, however it only focuses on the tank related mechanics. Check out my other guides for different roles. The video is split into chapters for each boss, you can find them down below, and all differences between difficulties will be mentioned when appropriate. Ulgrax the Devourer. This is a two-phase fight. The first phase is just the boss, and the second phase deals with only adds. This fight remains the same throughout LFR, normal, and heroic difficulties. In phase 1, there are two things for you to watch out for. Brutal Crash is the tank buster. This deals big physical damage and applies 20 stacks of a debuff called Tenderized. Each stack of Tenderized reduces your healing taken by 10%, and one stack falls off each second. So basically, this debuff lasts for 20 seconds. You want to taunt swap immediately after Brutal Crash is used. There is a soak mechanic called Carnivorous Contest where the boss attempts to pull players into him in order to eat them. The more players that soak this, the less damage it does and the weaker the boss's pull is. The boss will remain stationary during this attack, so you can move away and help with the soak mechanic if you'd like. However, it really shouldn't be necessary. I just wanted to mention this if your raid is melee heavy. Once it's over, return back to the boss. In phase 2, the boss disappears and adds will start spawning. Pick up all of the adds and keep them grouped together as much as possible so the players can AoE them all down. These adds do apply a stacking debuff, but it honestly shouldn't be much of an issue. If you notice damage ramping, then utilize your defenses appropriately. Be aware of the graphic as the boss will be charging across the arena, so move the adds if you're in that path. Once the boss charges a few times, he reappears and needs to be fed. If any adds are still alive when he emerges, take the adds closer to him. Once he reaches 100 energy, he will resume phase 1. And one final note here is that while the boss is being fed, he will use Hungering Bellows. Each time he uses this, it buffs his damage by 10%, so keep in mind that his attacks right after feeding are going to hit much harder. Utilize a defensive if needed. The BloodBound Horror. This is a single phase fight that involves realm switching and adds, so the raid will be split into two groups. There are some differences between all three difficulties as well, and I'll make mention of those later. First, let's talk about the realm switching mechanic. You have the normal realm, which is only the boss, and the shadow realm, which is where the adds exist. In order to switch realms, you must be hit by the boss's frontal cone attack, Gruesome Disgorge. This is targeted at you, so you'll always be hit unless you don't have aggro. Players hit by this attack are sent to the Shadow Realm for 40 seconds, during which time all adds must be killed. Failing to kill the adds will almost always result in a wipe. Alright, now the fight. Awareness is extremely important here. Adds spawn where the Shadow Pillar is located, so if you are going to the Shadow Realm, you need to position yourself next to this. There is no pattern with these spawns, it is completely random. After the Gruesome Disgorge attack, you will want to taunt swap. The tank in the Shadow Realm needs to grab the Watcher add as he is movable. The two caster adds do not move. Interrupt the Watcher guy before he casts his Bulwark ability, otherwise it will shield the boss, and keep him close to the caster ads so that he can be cleaved. Now let's cover the difficulty differences. On normal difficulty, a debuff is applied to those that are hit by Gruesome Disgorge. This increases the damage of the next Gruesome Disgorge by 100%, so groups need to alternate going to the Shadow Realm. This really ramps the movement of this fight, and you need to be aware of where the adds are spawning so you can quickly reposition yourself. On LFR, this debuff doesn't exist, so honestly, whoever is closer to the adds can just slightly reposition. On Heroic, the boss gains a new ability called Spewing Hemorrhage. Two beams will extend out from the boss to his left and right, and then they will slowly rotate counterclockwise. This attack triggers shortly after half of the raid is sent to the Shadow Realm. So not only do you have to be constantly aware where the adds are, but now you need to properly position the boss so that you give the other group enough time to kill the adds before the beam reaches them. You want to position the boss so that its right hand is close to the other group. That way, the beam has the furthest path to travel, giving your other team the time needed to kill all the adds. Sikran. This is a single phase, single target fight that remains the same for you on all difficulties. You should be able to keep the boss in the center of the room. The tank buster is called Captain's Flourish, and it's a 3-part attack. The boss will use Expose twice and then Phase Lunge. You'll want to swap after the second Expose. If you miss, Phase Lunge will likely kill the other tank. Aside from this, the only other mechanic is when the boss reaches 100 energy to run out of the shadow effect. A final note, you may have to reposition depending on how well other players handle mechanics. Ghosts should be placed away from the boss, but if they are close, they will leave behind a pool that you need to avoid. Rasha'nan. This is a single phase fight with brief intermissions where you have to chase after the boss. During phase 1, tanks should be positioned directly in front of the boss as he does not move. Always stay in melee range as well, otherwise the boss will deal AoE damage to the raid. The tank buster here is called Savage Assault. This deals big physical and nature damage. 60% of that damage that is unmitigated is then applied as a 12-second dot. So in order to reduce the damage of that dot, you want to use a defensive right before you get hit with Savage Assault. Swap after each hit. Occasionally the boss will spawn a bunch of little adds, but they should be handled by the DPS, so don't stress out over trying to pick them up. During the intermission, the boss will fly away to a different part of the arena. Just avoid the swirlies as you chase him. There is one thing to pay attention here. When the boss stops, he will try to cast Acidic Eruption. This needs to be interrupted. On heroic difficulty, the only difference is during the intermission. After he lands, he will use a soak mechanic. All players should help soak this as it deals massive damage and yanks players towards the edge. More players soaking means less damage and a weaker pull. Phase 1 will then repeat. Broodtwister. This is a single phase fight that involves different adds. There are 3 containers in the corners of the room. Once aggroed and then when at 100 energy, the boss will travel to the closest container and begin opening it. Once it's opened, black blood will start to expand from that container and outward until that area is filled. You also notice a bunch of eggs. Each egg has a certain type of mob inside. Players will hatch these eggs using a boss's ability. If any black blood touches an egg, it will hatch that egg and also greatly empower the adds that are inside. Proper positioning is as follows. When the boss is aggroed, you want to keep him as close to the center as possible. Therefore, when he goes to activate a container, he has to travel a large distance. This reduces damage to the raid and allows extra free damage to the boss. Once the boss is almost back at 100 energy, you want to keep that boss in the outskirts of the next area so that he again has to travel a long distance to reach the next container. The tank buster here is called Volatile Concoction. This applies a heavy hitting dot that lasts for 8 seconds. Once it expires, it will deal a burst of raid-wide damage. This raid damage scales with your remaining HP, so utilize cooldowns and make sure you're as close to full HP as possible before this expires. Swap after each hit. Now let's cover the adds. There are 3 types of adds, but you only need to actually grab one of them. The biggest egg spawns a Colossal Spider. Grab aggro on these guys as they deal big damage. They will hit you with Vicious Bite, and with every bite, they will increase damage of their next bite by 25%. Utilize a defensive if the damage starts to ramp. The middle-sized eggs will spawn a worm. This worm does not move and will only cast a raid-wide AoE that needs to be interrupted. If you can, move the boss closer to a worm to get some extra cleave damage. However, all of the DPS should handle the worm. The small egg clusters spawn a bunch of adds, but you can't do anything with them. If they travel near you, use an AoE CC ability to try to help slow them down. There is no difference on any difficulty here, just more eggs for you to keep track of. Nexus Princess. This is a pure single target fight that has a brief intermission period when the boss reaches 100 energy. This fight requires good awareness and positioning as the main mechanic here is dealing with portals that will pull players towards them. The hexagon in the center of the arena is used to handle the portal mechanics. The boss will target a few players with assassination. These players will move to one of these corners to drop their debuff. It will leave behind a shadow clone. These shadow clones will turn into portals when the boss uses Nether Rift. Each portal will strongly pull players towards them, and anyone that gets sucked inside will die. The idea here is to offset portals so that the pulls cancel each other out. As the tank, you need to be aware of where portals are placed and try to keep the boss on the opposite side because she will also spawn a portal at her current location. Once she starts casting Nether Rift, move to the center of the hexagon to avoid her portal. Just a note, she will not move until she finishes her cast. After the portal closes, move the boss back to your previous location. The shadow clones will move positions during the Twilight Massacre attack. After this attack, the boss will open portals again, so pay attention to where the shadow clones relocate to. Position the boss to help negate the portal pulls. Aside from that, the tank buster is called Void Shredders. Taunt swap after this is used. For the intermission, just focus on DPS. When you're targeted with a blue line, just stand still so other players can move. For heroic difficulty, the portal mechanics operate the same, however you do have to be aware of orbs that will travel through the arena. A few seconds after players drop their shadow clone, they will shoot out 3 orbs from their location, so move appropriately. The only change to the intermission is you have to avoid pie slices. The Silken Council. This is a 3-phase fight with intermissions between each phase. During the intermissions, the bosses do not move, so just focus on dealing damage. There are 2 bosses. A noob is the melee boss and needs to be tanked. Skein Spinner is a caster but cannot be tanked, he just jumps around the arena. Keep the bosses stacked as much as possible for cleave damage as they both share a health bar. As tanks, there are only a few things to be aware of. The tank buster is present in each phase and called Piercing Strike. This deals heavy damage and applies a debuff, increasing damage of the next Piercing Strike by 100%, so taunt swap after each use. Phase 1 will have adds, but they fixate other players, so use an AoE CC if they get close to you. A noob will burrow for his charge attack. You can help with the web mechanic since he is not attacking you. One tank steps inside the web on the ground, the second tank touches the cocoon that's in the center. You'll both be tethered, and then you should stretch that tether across the charge path. A noob will be stunned, and you can get back to the boss. The first intermission. Just stand next to the first pie slice that goes on the ground. Once it explodes, then step inside that free area. Phase 2. This is mostly the same as Phase 1 for you. The only difference is when the caster boss teleports to the center of the arena, you want to keep a noob away from him. There is a dispel mechanic and it is difficult to do if the bosses are stacked. So after the suck in and web tether, go ahead and drag a noob to the side of the center. The second intermission consists of avoiding rings on the ground. Phase 3 is pretty much the same, however players cannot choose who they web with. Wait for the caster to teleport to the center and then move a noob away. There's really only one difference here, and that's with LFR difficulty. LFR, the dispels automatically go to the caster boss regardless of where players are, so you can keep them grouped the entire fight. Queen Ansurek. This is a 3-phase fight with 1 intermission. There are notable differences between all 3 difficulties, and I'll break those down at the end. Phase 1. The boss should be tanked around the edge of the platform in either a clockwise or counterclockwise rotation. Phase 1's Tank Buster consists of 2 abilities. Liquefy is used first. This deals nature and physical damage and applies a 30-second debuff, increasing all damage taken by 200%. This will also create an acid pool underneath the boss. Feast is the second ability that deals heavy physical damage and applies a large healing absorb. So here's what you do. Once the boss uses Liquefy, you should taunt swap. The tank that taunts should quickly move the boss away from the acid pool and pop a defensive for when Feast is used. You will have aggro and continue taking damage, but will not get any heals until healers can clear off your healing absorb. Aside from that, the main thing you need to worry about is avoiding the Venom Nova. Find the green bubble and stand inside the ring. Once the Nova is about to cast, someone should step on the green bubble and pop everyone up into the air over the ring. Some difficulty notes here. On LFR, the bubble just spawns immediately, so it can appear on a melee character underneath the boss. Stay aware of this and move the boss accordingly. On normal and heroic, players actually control where the bubble lands. Some heroic notes. There are 2 bubbles present and both must be popped. Both tanks should be marked, and each tank takes their own circle with the rest of the raid following according to groups. Also, the healing absorb left by Feast increases in size depending on how much damage is done to you, so pop a defensive before Feast actually hits you. The intermission occurs around 35% HP. The main thing here is to avoid the venom waves and to run to the outside of the arena when the boss uses rest. She will try to pull you inside of her circle, and if she does, you die. Phase 2. 2 ads appear on the platform. Tank these near the edge where they spawn, but leave a little space to stand. Once these ads die, it will leave an orb that explodes, knocking all players up to the next platform. There are a bunch of ads between 3 different platforms here. Just avoid the telegraphed lines, as expellers will try to knock you off the platform. The boss will still use rest during this, so don't get pulled off. The last platform has another ad just like the first one. Just keep it near the edge so that it can knock you over to the final platform. This remains the same on all difficulties. Phase 3 consists of 2 tank busters that require 2 taunt swaps. Infest is used first. This places a ring around you, and once it expires, a bunch of small spiders will spawn. These spiders must be killed before they reach the boss, as they will greatly buff her. The second attack is called Gorge. This hits you every half second and lasts 2.5 seconds. Each hit deals damage and applies a stacking debuff that increases damage taken by 35% for 45 seconds. So here's what you do. When the first tank gets hit with Infest, taunt swap. The tank with Infest needs to run out and away from the boss to drop the spider ads, so that the DPS can burn them down. The second tank needs to pop a defensive in order to survive her Gorge attack. The first tank that dropped the spiders should then quickly run back to the boss and taunt swap. Repeat this process. The main mechanic here is using the portals. The boss will teleport to the center of the arena and create a cosmic ring on the outside that will start to shrink. Once it gets close, use the portal to teleport to the other side, otherwise you die. The only other note is that the boss will spawn spider ads. They do not move, they just take the boss close to them for extra cleave damage. Congratulations, you just cleared the Nerubar Palace raid. Shout out to these channel members. If this video helped, then press the thumbs up. Subscribe if you enjoy WoW content. Join the Discord for a friendly community. You can show extra support by becoming a channel member. It's 99 cents a month and gives you early ad-free access to all my videos. I also have Prefessional tank merch, so check it out. I'll see you in the next one.